Oh my goodness. I have had the craziest time being consistent in recording these videos. It is almost ridiculous. It is almost insane. Not for lack of wanting to, but two reasons. I think one, just feeling like the time is right to record. I want to be in a right space to be able to offer something of use. And two, it just seems like life has been so busy that to be able to actually record has been just wild. And so I guess I'm going to highlight that in this video, and perhaps the reading will amplify that idea that sometimes life doesn't allow you to do what you think you have to, and you need to go with the flow of things. And I suspect, based on the title of today's reading, that that is going to be highly applicable. So let's go. Today we are in A Course in Miracles. I love showing you the book every time. A Course in Miracles, chapter 4. And this is section 7, called Creation and Communication. And one more thing I should say, I think part of the interruption on creating these videos is that just finding a time where there's space allocated to me by the people in my life has been challenging. Not to say that they wouldn't let me, but I have a hard time focusing when there's other people nearby. It's almost like I need a really clear palette in my brain to be able to paint something worth watching, or even sharing any thoughts worth sharing. So I think that this time is really valuable, and so let's get on with it. Minute and a half in, here we go. So section 7, Creation and Communication. 1. It is clear that while the content of any particular ego illusion does not matter, its correction is more helpful in a specific context. Ego illusions are quite specific, although the mind is naturally abstract. Part of the mind becomes concrete, however, when it splits. The concrete part believes in the ego because the ego depends on the concrete. The ego is the part of the mind that believes your existence is defined by separation. 2. Everything the ego perceives is a separate whole, without the relationships that imply being. The ego is thus against communication, except insofar as it is utilized to establish separateness rather than to abolish it. The communication system of the ego is based on its own thought system, as is everything else it dictates. Its communication is controlled by its need to protect itself, and it will disrupt communication when it experiences threat. This disruption is a reaction to a specific person or persons. The specificity of the ego's thinking, then, results in spurious generalization, which is really not abstract at all. It merely responds in certain specific ways to everything it perceives as related. 3. In contrast, spirit reacts in the same way to everything it knows is true, and does not respond at all to anything else, nor does it make any attempt to establish what is true. It knows that what is true is everything that God created. It is in complete and direct communication with every aspect of creation because it is in complete and direct communication with its creator. This communication is the will of God. Capital W, will of God. Creation and communication are synonymous. God created every mind by communicating his mind to it. Wow. Thus establishing it forever as a channel for the reception of his mind and will. Since only beings of a like order can truly communicate, his creations naturally communicate with him and like him. This communication is perfectly abstract, since its quality is universal in application and not subject to any judgment, any exception, or any alteration. God created you by this and for this. The mind can distort its function, but it cannot endow itself with functions it was not given. That is why the mind cannot totally lose the ability to communicate, even though it may refuse to utilize it on behalf of being. 4. Existence as well as being rests on communication. Existence, however, is specific in how, what, and with whom communication is judged to be worth undertaking. Being is completely without these distinctions. It is a state in which the mind is in communication with everything that is real. To whatever extent you permit this state to be curtailed, you are limiting your sense of your own reality, which becomes total only by recognizing all reality in the glorious context of its real relationship to you. This is your reality. It does not desecrate it or recoil from it. It is your real home, your real temple, and your real self. 5. God, who encompasses all being, created beings who have everything individually, but who want to share it to increase their joy. Nothing real can be increased except by sharing. That is why God created you. Divine abstraction takes joy in sharing. That is what creation means. How, what, and to whom are irrelevant because real creation gives everything, since it can create only like itself. Remember that the kingdom there is no difference. Remember that in the kingdom there is no difference between having and being as there is in existence. In the state of being, the mind gives everything always. 6. The Bible repeatedly states that you should praise God. This hardly means that you should tell him how wonderful he is. He has no ego with which to accept such praise, and no perception with which to judge it. But unless you take your part in the creation, his joy is not complete because yours is incomplete. And this he does know. He knows it in his own being and its experience of his Son's experience. The constant going out of his love is blocked when his channels are closed, and he is lonely when the minds he created do not communicate fully with him. 7. God has kept your kingdom for you, but he cannot share his joy with you until you know it with your whole mind. Revelation is not enough because it is only communication from God. God does not need revelation returned to him, which would clearly be impossible, but he does want it brought to others. This cannot be done with the actual revelation. Its content cannot be expressed because it is intensely personal to the mind that receives it. It can, however, be returned by that mind to other minds through the attitudes the knowledge from the revelation brings. 8. God is praised whenever any mind learns to be wholly helpful. This is impossible without being wholly harmless because the two beliefs must coexist. The truly helpful are invulnerable because they are not protecting their egos, and so nothing can hurt them. Their helpfulness is their praise of God, and he will return their praise of him because they are like him, and they can rejoice together. God goes out to them and through them, and there is great joy throughout the kingdom. Every mind that is changed adds to this joy with its individual willingness to share in it. The truly helpful are God's miracle workers, whom I direct until we are all united in the joy of the kingdom. I will direct you to wherever you can be truly helpful and to whoever can follow my guidance through you. Well, that was really neat. That's the end of that section. And also the end of chapter 4, which is the illusions of the ego. A couple things stuck out to me. I really enjoyed in section 6 where it talked about the constant going out of his love is blocked when his channels are closed, and he is lonely when the minds he created do not fully communicate fully with him. That's a really great reminder in the sense that God is so generous in giving us revelations and downloads. And I don't know if you've ever experienced those, but for me, what that feels like when I receive a revelation or a download, as I call it, it's like a download in a computer when you like download a file off the internet or an email. So I feel like when I receive a download from God, it's like a sudden stroke of an idea that it just makes sense. Like something just popped in my head and I suddenly know something. And it happens a lot with, especially when I'm doing studies like A Course in Miracles, or when I'm studying the Bible, or when I'm studying other thoughts or ideas. And when something suddenly makes sense, like you might not have it in the terms of revelation, you might think of it like if you're studying for school or work and something just suddenly clicks. I like to think that that's the mind of God communicating revelation. And I do think he helps us with our work, whatever our work might be, if it's pumping gas or stocking shelves or preaching sermons or driving a school bus, whatever it might be. I think he gives us revelation. He gives us insight. I kind of had a funny insight this afternoon, but he gives us knowing, because when we're connected with him, he drops revelation or inspiration. And it's just wild. It's really wild. Sometimes when you start acknowledging it, it's like, oh God, I hear you. I hear you dropping that information to me. And this section where it says he is lonely when the minds he created do not communicate fully with him. He is lonely when we don't communicate back with him. It's not like we can reveal anything to him that he doesn't already know, but it totally makes sense that he would be lonely when we're inconsiderate of his presence in our life or unaware. Now, granted, we have limitations that make it difficult, but I would imagine that he would desire us to be aware of his presence. So I'll share this funny story and then I'll close this video up. Funny story happened before I made this video. I came home from work and my dad was actually, he has been working in our loft or our attic. We have a loft in our house, and he has been working in removing some things from the house that were his, that were stored here for some time. And so I came home from work and there was no sign of anyone being in the house. But as soon as I walked in, I just felt like I knew someone was in my house. I was just like, somebody's here. This is weird. Why is somebody here? And so I started kind of talking, and then I heard a male voice, and I was like, what in the world? And it said, I'm up here. And it turns out it was my dad up working in the loft at removing some more boxes. And it scared me at first because I wasn't expecting anybody to be in the house for sure. But I also thought I knew that he was here. Like I knew someone was here before hearing them and before seeing them. And there were no lights on to indicate that he was up there. But we have this sense, all that to say, we have a sense that our Father is with us. We know when our Father is with us. And in the case of my mortal dad, I knew that my dad was in the house, even though I thought, I felt a male presence. We can feel presences. We can feel other people in the home. That's partly why I struggle to make videos, because sometimes I just need total quiet to be able to make a discussion on this book or anything. When I want to study anything, I kind of need quiet. Because my spirit hears other spirits. I hear other people's presences. I feel their presences. I knew my dad was here. I didn't know it was him. I just knew somebody was in my house, somebody mortal, someone human. And I think when we develop that sensitivity and we pay attention to it and we recognize it, we get more keen, more aware of spiritual presence. And sometimes we can feel spiritual presence of angels or negative beings or even God's presence. And I think by this statement, he is lonely when the minds he created do not fully communicate with him or communicate fully with him. That makes sense, that he would want us to recognize his presence and also communicate with him. So my invitation would be, if anything you got from this lesson, that it would be to acknowledge God's presence in your life. Pay attention to little signs that he's with you. Maybe there's something you needed in your life that just comes to pass. Maybe there's something that pops out of the page of a book you're reading, or pops off the page of something you're watching online, or somebody says something that just is like, oh, that makes sense, or oh, that feels like a download, or oh, that's exactly what I needed to hear today. Yeah. So section 7, God does not need revelation returned to him, but he does want it brought to others. So share when you do notice God's presence. I also encourage you, share that you recognize God's presence with others. And maybe your sharing with them will help them to recognize that God is in their life too. And it doesn't need to be that God is distant, that he's up in the sky somewhere. It might be recognizing that God is just as capable, if he's in the sky on a throne, he's just as capable of coming down here to his footstool and walking around and making his presence known, however you want to imagine it. I don't know, maybe the particulars matter, maybe they don't, but I think just recognizing that he is here and sharing with your loved ones that he's here with you that's a wonderful thing. And that's partly why I'm making these videos. I struggle sometimes, like, what am I doing? But I think maybe that's the point, is to know that I feel God's presence, and I know you can too. So I invite you to pay attention and make note of it and share it with others. All right, that's it for today. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Feel free to leave a comment down below. Love to hear if you're still tracking along with the reading, and feel free to share. All right, have a blessed day. I will hopefully see you tomorrow.